Hi there, this is Jen, and thank you so much for joining me today. Today I am sharing two cards using a 6x8 stamp set from a new company called Maker Forte. So I purchased this stamp set when they first launched, which was, I believe, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it is a beautiful poinsettia stamp. So it's got the big poinsettia and then it's got a smaller one. This is an Alex Siberia design. She has a lot of digitals. But she has this clear one that she made in collaboration with Maker Forte. And so this will fit on a 4¼ by 5½ card base if you're going horizontal. But both of the cards that I make today are both going to be vertical cards. And I am using a piece of Bristol smooth cardstock and then stamping the stamp up with some VersaFine black. And VersaFine black is great ink if you want to watercoloring. It does not smear, but it does take quite a while to dry. So I usually get my hands in the ink and mess it up at some point. So I was smart on this one and grabbed a piece of paper so that would not happen. So I am going to be using my Tombos today. 845, 847, and 772 is going to be the colors that I use for the actual petals of the poinsettia. And I colored the flowers a few different ways. I started out putting the darkest color, which I believe is the 847, down towards the base of the flower petal, and then I took the more of the red color and put that towards the tip, and then to fill in the spaces, the lighter spaces, I used the 772. I think it's a really pretty color combination, but really you could just use one marker and it would have been fine as well. So the two cards that I make today, this first one took me probably about from start to finish, I want to say maybe an hour and a half of coloring, and that's the watercoloring and then going back in and adding deeper colors with the marker, as well as using the colored pencils. And so I kind of wanted to show that you can get a great look if you are doing some quick watercoloring, or if you're just kind of taking your time and slowing it down a little bit. I of course have sped this up in hyperspeed so that it does not take up too much of my video. But on this petal I went ahead and I outlined some of the shadow areas and then put that red in and then put that lightest color in. You can also put a base color down of your lightest color and have that peek through. So putting down that base color first and then putting those darker colors in afterwards. And that's what I did on the leaf portion of the card. And so I've got my coloring done, and I'm going to start on the leaves, and those are 177, 192, and 379, with 379 being the deepest shade. And so here I'm going to show you, I'm putting down that lightest color first, and I'm going to put some at the base and then just use my water to bring that color up. And then I will go in with that 379, which is more of like a teal color almost, and put that in where the shadows would be. And then on top of that I will put that mid color, which I believe is 192. And for this card I was very careful, because it's not an embossed image. I was very careful to make sure I was going at a slower pace so that the color didn't get all over the place. And when you're watercoloring on a Bristol smooth cardstock, you don't in general need very much water. Especially for darker colors, you don't need very much water at all to get that color to move around. The lighter colors, you might need a little bit more marker color or a little bit more water, but it doesn't take hardly any water at all. And so once I finished coloring in my image, I'm going to go in with my Prismacolor colored pencils. I normally do this every time I watercolor an image, just to add some tiny little details. And also I did color the center of the flowers with those pencils. And then I wanted to knock down some of the white color from the Bristol Smooth cardstock, and so I'm taking some Distress inks in Antique Linen and also in Tattered Rose. And I take the Antique Linen and use my blending brush for the most part all over the card except for the very bottom portion. And then to get into those little areas, I'm using a finger dauber and I'm using the tattered lace for that. And then next I'm going to go ahead and emboss in gold the sentiment. And the sentiment from the stamp set that I'm using says Peace and Joy. And I didn't get it stamped all the way. It did end up re-inking my Versamark pad because I don't think that the the ink was doing its job, and it did work great after that. So what I ended up doing was embossing it again on a separate piece of paper, and then just using a stitch die to cut that out, and that is going to be placed over that mess up that I did. And I found this really pretty green paper in my stash, and it matches perfectly with the leaves on the poinsettia, so I went ahead and matted it on that. And I also took another sentiment from the stamp set that says, may your holiday season be filled with, and then the other sentiment is peace and joy, and heat embossed a white sentiment. And then I took my glitter pen and went around just the petals of the poinsettia and added a few embellishments. I also did take a white gel pen and make little dots all over the petals and the leaves. I just think it looks cool. So in place of the splatter, which I love, I just used a gel pen and made some little white dots, which was super simple to do. But I really love how this card turned out. This stamp is just beautiful. So my next card, I'm going to be using some Canson XL watercolor paper, and I will be heat embossing this with gold embossing powder. And so for this card, I move a little bit quicker just because I have that raised edge of the embossing line. So I will go ahead and I'm going to stamp that on the top of the card panel, and then I will use my embossing powder and heat set that. And then I'll go ahead and flip the card the other direction and stamp again. And this was really easy to do without masking just because of the design of the stamp. It's almost like there's a lot going on. And so it was really easy to kind of just blend those two stamps together. So while I'm doing that, I just wanted to ask everybody, if you watch Netflix, what are you watching on Netflix these days? For me, Wentworth just came out, which is a show out of Australia about a women's prison. It's an awesome show. And then recently, me and my husband finished watching the series The Kingdom. I think it's called The Kingdom or Kingdom. And it's about some MMA fighters. It's not like a documentary or anything like that. It's like a series. It has Nick Jonas in it, which originally all I could think of was the Jonas Brothers. But he is so good in this role, and something like you wouldn't quite imagine him being in. But it was a series that was so awesome. I would totally recommend it, but it is definitely not for everybody. There is some very dark subject matter and some not so great things. So just a forewarning if you are going to go look. But totally watch the trailer. We really loved that series, and we were so sad there was only 3 seasons. But for the coloring for this next card, I am using some Canson XL watercolor paper along with my Caron Brush Marker Pros. And since this is an embossed image, this was so quick to color because I didn't have to worry so much about going outside of the lines. And so basically all I'm doing is taking the color towards the base of the petal and at the end of the petal, and then taking my water and moving the color, towards the center. And then I also did add extra water and take the paper towel and blot that up to give those lighter areas of the petals. I do that mainly on the one where I used the Arctic blue color. And then on the next flower, I'm using the grass and the almond. So I'm putting the darker color, which is the grass, towards the base, and the almond at the edge or the end of the petal. and then just moving these colors towards each other. I'm using a decent amount of water, so when I do that, it allows that green to kind of bleed into the almond color a little bit, which is something that's really cool with water, like standard watercolors, is watching that color kind of move into each other. And since this is a watercolor paper, that happens a lot easier than if I were using a Bristol, which it probably wouldn't hardly move at all because that paper is smooth. It's almost like, in comparison, it would be like a hot pressed watercolor paper. So for the last petals, I am coloring this in a turquoise, and I had to stop and go look because I think I keep calling these flowers, and I don't think they're actually flowers. They're actually leaves, is what I read. So all of the plant they're all leaves. They're not really flower petals. So that was interesting. So I went ahead and colored that last one in that beautiful turquoise color, and then all of the remaining parts, or the leaves, I am coloring with a cool gray. And that will pretty much finish off the card. I do go ahead and adhere this to a white card base, and then I have a sentiment that says "Be Merry," and that is from a Pinkfresh Studio die set that came out last year. I looked for it and I didn't see that it was available, so I don't remember the name of it, but it is white cardstock on a vellum shadow, and I'll go ahead and adhere that. I add a few white Nuvo drops, and that finishes off this card. I am super in love with this stamp set. I don't have anything like it, and so I really loved creating these cards, and I hope you loved watching and maybe got some ideas. If you liked this video or found it informative, please go ahead and give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much for watching and taking some time out of your day to spend with me, and I hope to catch you next time.